Hey, welcome to the end of week 4. Um, I'm coming to you from the outside of a monastery within a cloister where monks walk and think and contemplate the nature of belief and God and what they had for breakfast. I I decided to leave it all, just quit my job, quit this crazy family and these crazy dogs, quit Michigan and go off and join a monastery. And so I walked in the door and I said, I'm here, brothers. I would like to join. And they said, we are welcome. We welcome you. We thank you for being here. And we know that you will honor God with your presence. And I said, God who? And now they won't let me in. So I'm coming back to teach. God who is one of my favorite questions to ask, because I'm an asshole, but also because I find it fascinating when we talk to each other. I love how the cross on the monastery statue is right up over my head. Um, uh, when we talk to each other and we talk about something, we generally believe that the person we're speaking with knows exactly what we're talking about or understands things the way that we talk about them or believes the same things we believe. So if I'm talking about Oreos, obviously you love Oreos, and so I can say, that last time you had Oreos, and what I'm really talking about is this orgasmic experience of filling and stuff. And you know exactly what I mean. That last time you had Oreos, it was wonderful. It was this perfect moment. But sometimes when we're talking to each other and we say God, we assume that the person sitting across from us understands what we mean when we say God. It's a big assumption. Our definitions of God are very different. Our beliefs about God are very different. Whether or not we have a God or honor that word is very different. And we can move this discussion that we have about the natures of God and our beliefs in God, and we can move it into many different things. So if I say love is love, what do I mean by that? What is love? If I say that voting is important for democracy, what is voting? What is democracy? It can get a bit maddening. Thankfully, we always have the baseline of Oreos are awesome, and we can always come back to that, and we know that there's no discussion there. Everybody knows that this is the truth. We're talking about philosophies of God today, philosophies of religion, and we're not really going to go very far into philosophies of religion. My point is to mostly just think about God. I want to show you how gods are not always what we think that they are, or that we can have different interpretations of God. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share a video. I'm only going to share, I think if I cut down the length of the clip, I can actually get it through YouTube and they won't censor the video for me copywriting infringing. So I'm only going to share just a little bit and you'll get the idea, and then I will share a link on the Moodle page. This is from Ariana Grande's God is a Woman. All right, we'll stop there. Hopefully, that avoids the YouTube censoring. It's an amazing video, amazing song, but amazing video, well worth your time. And I'll share it on the Moodle page. It's shocking to people whenever somebody says to them, God who, or if they say, oh God, yeah, I talk to her every day. Some people hear that and their brains go, wow. You can actually think of God as being something different than what I think of him as being. And of course, God is a man. Why would you ever say God is a woman? Don't show them a picture of black Jesus. Who knows what they'll do? Our philosophies about God can move in many different directions, and philosophies about God are things that people die over. People will kill over their philosophy of God. People will defend their philosophy of God. I think it's worth studying philosophies of God, not so that you can tell me what you believe and try to convince me, and not so that I can tell you what I believe and try to convince you, because I know that you already love Oreos, and there's no need for me to try to convince you of that. I think it's worth talking about philosophies of God so that we can talk about how we establish arguments, how we prove arguments, how we try to persuade others of arguments. Now, I'm not going to get into the discussions that I get into in my writing class where we talk about rhetoric and persuasion and academic writing, but instead I'm going to think more about what does it mean to say, this is a truth. This is a truth because this is a truth because this is a truth. Or we know this and we know this, so we can suggest this. These are forms of philosophical argument. They're important forms. They are ways that we go about making meaning in the world, and we do it day to day in our everyday life when I try to convince my partner what movie we should watch or why her TV show is stupid. Don't tell her I said that, please. We make these kind of arguments all the time, and a lot of times our arguments are not very effective. Sometimes they're just emotional, or sometimes they are just outlandish statements, and we can just watch our news channel to see ridiculous, outlandish statements being thrown out by people on a public stage quite often without any kind of basis in logic or evidence. A philosopher attempts to make a much more solid argument, one that is irrefutable by other logics. Philosophies of God are interesting because they're so hard to prove. We have no way of actually saying, yes, this is an absolute truth. Because any truth that you might come up with, I could probably come up with a counter truth. For instance, you say, God is love. And I say, God who? For instance, you say, God created the earth, and I say, God who? Almost any argument about God is pretty easily refuted because they are unprovable as pieces of statements. Of course, almost any argument about philosophy is difficult too. How do we know what a mind is? How do we know that we each exist? How can we define education? We keep on trying. That's the important thing about philosophy, is that we keep on trying. So let's take a look at a couple of philosophical statements. Let me try one for you. Thor, he's a god. Thor is real because more people believe in him than don't. So, obviously, Thor must be real. Is that an argument? Is that an argument we can have? Well, most people believe in Thor. Most people have heard of Thor. Obviously, he's real. Now, on the one hand, we know that most people have heard of Marvel Comics Thor and not the actual Norse god Thor. Does that make him any less real? Here's another one. Look, if everyone else believes in Bozo the Clown, you should too. Is that a philosophical argument? Is that a way of establishing arguments? It's based on an if-then. If this is true, then this must be true. Is it necessarily true? Here's another one. People have believed in God since the beginning of time. So, of course, you should believe in Athena. Athena is real. We can see a pattern here, maybe, that mass belief does not necessarily prove the existence of God. Well, let's try this one. Look at this beautiful flower. Look at this beautiful house. Look at this beautiful world. Obviously, beauty is proof that the flying spaghetti monster is real. We often deal, when we deal in arguments, in what are called logical fallacies. Fallacies that make we pretend like something is true, but then it really has very little basis in reality. I was arguing with a guy the other day on Facebook about voting for Biden, and he and I have known each other a very long time. We are both very, very liberal. We are both almost radical in some of our beliefs and how far left we are. I don't think it's radical, but others might say it's radical. I believe that people shouldn't die because they can't get health care. Some people think that's radical. So I was arguing with a guy about politics, and we have very similar beliefs, but he believes that Joe Biden is a schlub, and so he's not going to vote for Joe Biden. He would rather vote for somebody who truly represents his beliefs. I don't believe Joe Biden represents my beliefs, but I'm going to vote for the candidate who has the best chance of becoming president, whose initials aren't DJT. So we were arguing about this, and he pulled off this statement that I was a so-called liberal, or I was a neoliberal. He used a few statements for me. And what he was doing, and when he was doing that, was a logical fallacy. He was using what is called an ad hominem attack. He was attacking the person and not the argument. It's a logical fallacy. It does not work as an argument. And we can put that into an argument machine and push a button, and it will come out as an invalid argument, because he's not talking about the argument, he's talking about the person. These kind of arguments happen all the time. They happen in philosophy, bad arguments. They happen in your relationships. They happen on the political stage. But what we want to do when we practice philosophy is try to practice good argument. So we got a really good example this week of somebody trying to practice good argument. I don't know that I buy his arguments. Many of his arguments come on a basic idea, and I don't know that he proves them, and I think he's got a real fallacy in them. But Aquinas's arguments in the existence of God, by the way, this is one of those big classic philosophical texts. It's really important as a text in the Western world. His arguments for the reasons why God exists try to lay out a logical cause, a logical rationale. What are they? Well, his first argument is prime mover, that everything is in motion. But how did it get in motion? Nothing goes in motion by itself. You always need something to make it move. You need a mover. And we can see that many things have movers. This ball was not in motion if it's on my hand. And then I come along and I make it move. I'm a mover. What made me move? What made my mom move? What made my dad move? I'm not going to go any further with how they moved to make me, but what made the things before me move? What Aquinas does, and he says, okay, we are all in motion. What made us move? How do we know that there is a God? We must believe that there is a God, because we cannot keep going back and back and back. There must be a prime mover, something that was always and already here, who existed and who made things move. That is Aquinas' argument about whatever is in motion must be put in motion by another. But it can't go on into infinity, because then there would be no first mover, and consequently no other mover. If you don't have a first mover, you can't have other movers. As the staff moves only because it is put in motion by the hand. Therefore it is necessary to arrive at a first mover, put in motion by no other, and this one everyone understands as God. That's Aquinas' argument. There must be movers. Obviously, things don't move by themselves, so there must be movers. That means everything must have been put into motion. But there must be a first mover, something that moved something else, right, for the very first time, that started all this motion. If not, how did anything ever get into motion? If there wasn't something that came before that moved, it's a weird argument, but it kind of works as a philosophy. God exists because there must be a first mover. Now, how do we explain God? Well, that's where it becomes difficult because God is unexplainable. So we have to accept that God always is and always was and was always in motion, and that he or she or it or they was the first mover. His next argument is about causation, and that is that nature has to have an efficient cause, that it had to become about because of some reason, that it wasn't just that things started moving, but that there was something that put one thing together or put things together in a way that made sense, that had a reason for its existence. That reason was God, the primary mover, or the primary causation. The next is the primary existence. How do we know our existence has meaning? Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. But what Aquinas would say is, well, we know existence has meaning because we have a pattern of existence that was meaningful. Something that existed before us that was meaningful. And that existence, of course, goes back to the very first, the primary existence that we all pattern our meaning after. And that is what gives us meaning. And then his last point is the primary design. I'm sorry, no, I missed one. The primary good is the moral truth, that we had to come by our morality somehow. You can keep on telling somebody what is good, but how do you know what is good? What is good is because something good existed. And then the last one is primary design. We can look at the perfect design of the world, of the ways things work, and we can say that there was design here, obviously. There's some kind of design going on in the way that things work. That design leads us into the very beginning, where there is primary design. We can kind of call Aquinas' arguments the primary argument. Without the first, the rest doesn't happen. And what do you do to explain the first? It just always was. That's where the argument gets a little weak. It's a little shady. It just always was. We also have a problem with the conclusion of his argument. Well, everyone calls this God, so it must be God. We have already seen that that's not a very valid argument. Many, many scholars have talked about gods and how gods exist and why gods exist. I'll just go over a few more. One theory is the good bet theory, or you might as well, or better safe than sorry theory. And that is based on Pascal's argument that, look, you can live your life, you can live it how you want. We have no real solid evidence that God exists. But what if it does? What if you get through all of this at the end, you keel off, you leave this mortal plane of existence, and you thought you were just going to become dust, but no, there is a God. In that case, it is better for you to have lived. It is more logical for you to have lived as if there was a God, because you don't know. And that doubt means that you should be living right now as if there is a God. It's a fairly logical argument, right? It's just a choice. If you don't know if that bridge is going to hold you, you don't walk on it. Why take the risk? Why not take the bridge that you know will hold you, even if you can't be sure that it will? The next is a perfect order idea. That if we look at the ways that things are designed, that human beings have so many chromosomes, that there's an X chromosome and a Y chromosome, if we look at how numbers work in the world, if we look at perfect organizations and perfect balance, we can see that it feels like there's some design here. There's something that feels like it just couldn't have happened naturally. How do we grow into such beings beings who can create music like Ariana Grande does, beings who can become beautiful like I am. How does this happen unless there is some kind of design? And that perfect order, that mathematical perfection that we can kind of point to. Don't ask me to do the math because I don't know anything about math. But that mathematical perfection, that feeling that we get when we see something that is mathematically perfect, that is God. C.S. Lewis, a writer, you may not know him because he wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and a few other things. But C.S. Lewis was a writer in the early 20th century, and his belief was that God exists. How do we know God exists? Because there is a moral order to the universe. We know how we should treat each other. We know how we should act. We know what is good or what is evil because of a God, because God exists. That existence gives us a sense, because if not, we would just be animals. And we can kind of feel this a little bit today, right? In a more animalistic society, we begin to wonder about the nature of God. Some of us turn to gods when things become more scary. There are many, many, many arguments for God. I think they're worth exploring and they're worth thinking about. I think they're worth thinking about not because we're necessarily going to come to an answer, but because gods matter as far as our understanding of our existence in the world. I'll play another part of a song. I could go back to Ariana Grande, but sorry. This is a song by Randy Newman called "That's Why," a God song. That's why I love mankind.
Christians and the Jews will have a jamboree. The Buddhists and the Hindus join on satellite TV. Pick the four greatest priests. They began to speak. Say, Lord, the plague is on the world. Lord, no man is free. Temples that we built to you tumble into the sea. Lord, if you won't take care of us, won't you please, please let us be? And the Lord said, I burned down your cities. How blind you must be. I take from you your children and you say, how blessed are we. You all must be crazy. Put your faith in me. That's why I love mankind. You really need me. That's why I love mankind.
It's one of my favorite Randy Newman songs. Let me stop this before somebody else starts singing. Sorry. Okay. It's one of my favorite Randy Newman songs. Randy Newman's an artist. You may recognize his voice from the Toy Story movies. He sings "You've Got a Friend in Me." But he's also got some very funny, very cynical songs about different belief systems and politics. Where's my Zoom? There it is. Sorry. Couldn't find you. Here's what I would say what Randy Newman's song represents. We have arguments in philosophy, but we also have styles of arguments, or we also have schools of thought within philosophy. And this is why it's also good to study philosophy, not only do you understand that there are ways to go about making meaning with each other, ways that we establish claims and prove claims with each other, but you also begin to learn how we categorize our arguments, and we talk about different things in different ways. Randy Newman's argument about God is that God is a good or bad or benevolent or apathetic or positive or negative force in the world who created the world and then just kind of let us run, and then kind of finds it funny that we think he would care about us. It's a deistic idea that God, it's from what's called a clockmaker idea. God set the clock, wound it up, let it go, and walked away. There's a theistic idea, the idea that God interacts with the world, that God has a direct control over your life, that God cares about you as an individual. There is a monotheistic God, that there is one God. There is I should have looked up the word. A multiple theistic God, a pantheistic, that there are many gods. There are many ways to categorize thinking into different kind of gods. What this leads us into, I think, is the question of faith. What does it mean to have faith? And this is what our second reading for the week was about, was the question of faith. When is it rational? You know, as a purely heretical person, somebody who believes that the only perfect thing in the world is an Oreo, the question of faith is a question that we normally wouldn't talk about in the academic world. But our essay provides a pretty good rationale for when faith is rational. And what the essay generally comes down to is faith is rational. Faith is reasonable. Faith is rational when you can say, okay, I know there's evidence here. I know there's a world here, but I have chosen faith. When we can recognize that faith is a choice that you might make outside of what the evidence says, or that you can make this choice, I believe in this because I believe it will someday be shown to be true. We can't see all the evidence yet. No matter what this evidence right here is saying, we can't see all the real evidence. And so I believe this. That's when it's reasonable. When you can put your faith in the possibility of truth, then it makes sense to have a faith. It's a nice argument. It's an argument that makes it more rational for you as a person who believes to accept me as a person that doesn't believe, or for me as a person who doesn't believe to accept you as a person who does believe. And that belief matters, because when we have a person of Christian faith here, and we have a person of Muslim faith here, sometimes those two people can clash, can go at each other. Sometimes there are crusades where we invade other people's countries to try to convince them to believe in our God. If we can instead say, okay, you have a faith. I know that there's evidence that makes me not believe in that faith. You have a faith. Go for it. You are rational, even if I don't agree with you. I have a faith. You don't agree with me. You think there's evidence that disproves me. But I know that there's evidence somewhere that I can trust. I'm rational. You're rational. I'm rational. We can exist together. What happens when maybe we seem completely irrational? Let's go back to a shared screen. And we go to the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. I hope you looked at this. Pastafarianism is an important religion in the world. It matters. It's not as important as Oreoism, but It's important. What happens when we have somebody of Christian faith over here, then somebody of Muslim faith here, and we have somebody of Pastafarianism here? Can we still say that belief is rational? Can we still say that religion matters? God is real. Let's say we can get there, because this is what the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster does. It says, you want me to accept you as a part of society when you say that there's this guy named Jesus, and he died, and he rose again, and I should believe in him. And you want me to accept this belief that there's a prophet who has come along and revealed new meanings to me. I'm going to believe that there is a flying spaghetti monster. Now you may think, oh, you're mocking me. You, Mr. Belief over here, or you, Mr. Belief over here, or you, Ms. Belief, may believe that I'm mocking me. Ariana Grande may think that I'm mocking her because she can't be God because there's a flying spaghetti monster. I'm not. I have my faith. And if I accept your faith, you should accept mine. This is the argument of the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. And yet, there's an underlying argument here. Obviously, the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster is not a faith that somebody is going to hold within their brain and within their heart or their soul or whatever that is. It is a belief that is made up in order to be a counter-argument to the idea of belief, to show how ridiculous it is. Because as soon as we get that person to admit, okay, I want to hold my belief in Oreos as being true and honorable, and I believe we should have Oreos in school. If I'm going to argue that, then I have to argue that we should also have meatballs in school. Because if I'm going to think that my belief matters, I have to think that your belief matters. It doesn't always work that way, but that's the idea behind the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Except, once they then say, see, I told you, if you can accept my belief, you can see that's ridiculous. And I can now show you how your belief is ridiculous. It's a fascinating issue. It's very easy to be dismissive of religion and to make fun of religion. I want to play one other clip of a song. This is Kendrick Lamar's Faith.
Back and forth with babysitters. Can't find no one to watch her kids, so she pay her sister. Her baby daddy ain't about shit, that nigga ain't about shit. Spit this jar of milk just to cop a new outfit. She pray to God every night, hoping that he'll mature. And maybe one day his kid's something that he'll live for. Baby wanna go back to school, but she needs some help. Because it's hard trying to pay the bills when you're by yourself. She thought about credit card scams till she heard a voice that said the devil is a lie, make a better choice. And so it's back to McDonald's and every month dealing with the crazy ass people at the county building. Look to the heavens and ask them to make a better way. They got a letter in the mail, lost her Section 8, and lost her faith again.
Turn off. Okay. It's easy to believe in a flying spaghetti monster. It's easy to make an argument that that God is real because Oreos are real. Oreos are perfect. They are round, two sides, a beautiful, dreamy center. Obviously, God exists because Oreos exists. How else could such a beautiful thing be in the world? How else could there be a world that would house Oreos, the most perfect food of all time, if God didn't exist? It's easy to make that argument and to make it some kind of sarcastically, because I'm not necessarily a person of faith. It's easy to say that God is this distant being because Randy Newman is not a person of Kendrick Lamar's faith. It's easy to say God is a woman, or Ariana Grande is God, because Ariana Grande is not participating in this person's faith. And by the way, it's easy for Kendrick Lamar to say faith is this when other people have different experiences. We all have different experiences. And our beliefs in faith, our beliefs in gods, matter because they are part of who we are and because we take them very seriously. But I believe we should also take very seriously this idea of establishing argument together, of making claims with each other that gods matter for certain reasons. I was going to show another video, but I think I'm just going to let it go. There is a very real sense that argumentation is often done because that's our real reason for existence. We seek out meanings together. We establish claims together. We refute claims together. Our whole purpose of being here is to figure out why we are here. It's a very spiritual kind of idea. A very idea that our lives matter because we are looking for belief. It's fairly easy for me sometimes to be dismissive of religious belief. But when I do so, I'm really not holding to my very own religious belief, which is love is love. We exist here for a reason, and I should accept your reasons for existing. Doesn't mean I don't have questioned them. It doesn't mean I can't philosophically argue with you, but I should accept them. We're going to keep on reading and thinking and coming up with other philosophies. Next week I'm going to present a outline of what we've done so far in a way of preparing us for our upcoming exam. You are working on your projects. We'll talk about those a little bit more. And just keep on reading. Philosophy Cafe, by the way, great. The people who are showing up care very much about the ideas that we're talking about. It doesn't mean that you don't if you're not showing up. You may be busy. You may have other things. I'm not trying to say that you don't care. But man, we're having a good time. You should join us Thursday at 3:30. Thanks for being here today. I hope you're doing well. Love your Oreo, respect your Oreo, and live for Oreo.